Chapter 15. Take a deep breath, you're excited. The morning of May 1st, Viktor Mikhailovich Polsov, driven by his usual restless energy, burst out onto the street and hurried toward the city center. At first, his many talents had nowhere to go. There were hardly any people around, and the holiday stands guarded by mounted police stood empty. But by 9 o'clock, orchestras started to purr, wheeze, and whistle from different corners of the city. Housewives ran out of their gates. Laughter and whooping echoed as someone chased a barking dog off the stands. Column of music workers in soft-collared shirts somehow squeezed themselves into the middle of the railroad workers' parade, getting underfoot and in everyone's way. A truck, decked out as a shiny new green SHCH series locomotive, kept bumping into the music workers from behind. From the belly of the locomotive, shouts rained down on the oboe and flute players. "Where's your organizer? Are you even supposed to be on Krasnormskaya? Can't you see you're causing a jam?" At this point, to the music workers' misfortune, Viktor Mikhailovich jumped in. "Of course you need to turn down this alley. They can't even organize a holiday," Polsov shouted, waving his arms. This way, what a mess." Trucks from the Starkomhaz and Melstray were hauling kids. The littlest ones stood at the truck's edge, the taller ones in the middle. The underage army waved paper flags and laughed themselves silly. Pioneer drums rattled. The pre-draft boys puffed out their chests and tried to march in step. It was crowded, noisy, and hot. Traffic jams formed every minute, and every minute they'd clear up again. To pass the time, people would hoist old men and activists up in the air. The old men wailed in high-pitched voices. The activists flew silently, faces serious. In one cheerful column, they mistook Viktor Mikhailovich for an organizer and started tossing him up too. Polsov kicked his legs like a puppet. They paraded an effigy of the British minister Chamberlain, whom a worker with impressive muscles whacked on the top hat with a cardboard mallet. The hat read, "League of Nations." 3 Komsomol members in tuxedos and white gloves drove by in a car, glancing sheepishly at the crowd. "Vasya," someone yelled from the sidewalk. "Hey bourgeois, give back the suspenders." Girls sang. In the crowd of social service workers, Alkin marched with a big red bow, singing dreamily. "From the taiga to the British seas. The Red Army is the strongest of all." The athletes shouted something unintelligible on command. Everything, people, cars, bands, was moving, rolling, and marching toward the new tram depot, where at exactly 1 o'clock, the first electric tram in Stargorod was set to roll out. No one really remembered when construction on the Stargorod tram began. Sometime back in 1920, when the Saturday volunteer workdays started, the depot workers and rope makers marched to the Gusicht with a band and spent the whole day digging holes. They dug a lot of deep, big holes. Among them ran a comrade in an engineer's cap, trailed by foremen with colorful poles. The next Saturday, they worked in the same spot. 2 holes, dug in the wrong place, had to be filled in again. The engineer, like a mother hen, swooped down on the foreman, demanding explanations. New holes were dug, even deeper and wider. When bricks arrived and real construction workers showed up, they started laying the foundation. Then everything went quiet. The engineer would still come by sometimes, pacing the brick-lined pit and muttering, "Cost accounting." He'd tap the foundation with a stick and hurry home, covering his frozen ears with his hands. The engineer's name was Trukov. Tram station which stalled at the foundation had been Trukov's dream since 1912, but the city council rejected his plan. 2 years later he tried again, but the war got in the way. After the war, the revolution intervened. Now it was the NEP, cost accounting, and self-sufficiency. In summer, the foundation would be overgrown with flowers. In winter, kids turned it into an ice slide. Trukov dreamed of doing something big. He was bored working in the city improvement department, fixing sidewalks and drawing up budgets for poster stands. But the big project never came. The tram plan, resubmitted, bounced around the provincial offices, sometimes approved, sometimes not, sent to the center. But either way, it just gathered dust. No money, no matter what. "This is barbaric," Trukov would yell at his wife. "No money, but there's money to overpay the cabbies and for horse-drawn deliveries. Stargorod's cabbies fleece everyone. Of course, it's a monopoly of marauders. Try walking 5 miles to the station with your luggage. The tram would pay for itself in 6 years." His pale mustache drooped in anger. His snub-nosed face twitched. He'd pull out blueprints printed on blue paper and show them to his wife for the 1,000th time, plans for the station, the depot, and 12 tram lines. "Hell with all 12, they can wait. But three lines. Without them, Stargorod will suffocate. Nothing will work. You won't be able to build on the outskirts or get to the station. It's Asia." "So what's it to you?" his wife protested. "Your salary won't go up or down. Look at what you've become." Trukov would snort and go saw firewood in the kitchen. Did all the housework himself. He built a cradle for the baby and a washing machine. At first, he did the laundry himself, explaining to his wife how to use the machine. At least a fifth of his salary went to foreign technical journals. To make ends meet, he quit smoking. In spring, he dug up the garden himself, fertilized it with chemicals, and grew huge vegetables. He took his project to the new head of Starkomhaz, Gavrilin, who just arrived from Samarkand, tanned by the Turkestan sun. Gavrilin listened for a long time, flipping through the blueprints without much interest, and finally said, In Samarkand, we don't need any trams. Everyone rides donkeys. A donkey costs 3 rubles cheap, and it can carry 10 poods. Such a little donkey, it's amazing. That's Asia for you, Trukov snapped. A donkey costs 3 rubles, but feeding it costs 30 a year. And how many rides do you get for 30 rubles on your tram? 300, not even every day of the year. Fine, order your donkeys, Trukov shouted, slamming the door as he stormed out. After that, Gavrilin made a habit of teasing Trukov whenever they met. So, are we ordering donkeys or building a tram? Gavrilin's face looked like a smooth, carved turnip. His eyes were sly. A couple of months later, Gavrilin called Trukov in and said seriously, I've got a plan. One thing's clear, there's no money and a tram isn't a donkey. You can't buy it for 3 rubles. We need a financial base. What's the practical solution? A joint stock company, or a loan with interest. How long till the tram pays for itself? 6 years from the day the first 3 lines open. Let's say 10, now the joint stock company. Who's in? The food trust, the oil center. Do the rope makers need a tram? We'll be sending freight cars to the station, so yes, the rope makers. Maybe the People's Commissariat of Railways will chip in. The Provincial Executive Committee will, for sure. Once we start, the State Bank and the Commercial Bank will give us a loan. That's my plan. On Friday, the Presidium will discuss it. If we go ahead, it's your show. Trukov spent the night feverishly doing laundry and explaining to his wife the advantages of trams over horse-drawn carts. On Friday, the decision was positive, and so began the creative agony. The joint stock company came together with great difficulty. The People's Commissariat of Railways kept changing its mind about joining. The Food Trust tried to get only 10% of the shares instead of 15%. Finally, all the shares were distributed, though not without some clashes. Gavrilin was called in by the Provincial Control Commission for pressure, but it all worked out. Now it was time to start. Well, Comrade Trukov, Gavrilin said, get going. Think you can build it. This isn't buying a donkey. Trukov dove into work. He stopped sawing wood and doing laundry. The time had come for the great project he dreamed of for years. Budgets were written, a construction team assembled, orders placed. Problems popped up in the least expected places. There were no concrete specialists in town. They had to be brought in from Leningrad. Gavrilin pushed, but the factories promised to deliver the machines only in a year and a half, though they were needed in a year at the latest. Only the threat of ordering from abroad got results. Then came smaller headaches. They couldn't find the right size iron, or they were offered untreated railroad ties instead of treated ones. When they finally got the right ones, Trukov himself went to the tie plant and rejected 60% of them. The cast iron parts had holes. The wood was damp. The rails were good, but even they arrived a month late. Gavrilin often showed up at the construction site in his old, wheezing Fiat. He and Trukov would get into arguments. Then came the financial crisis. The state bank cut the loan by 40%. There was nothing to build with. If they didn't get money in 2 weeks, they wouldn't be able to pay their bills. Lately, Trukov was sleeping at the construction office. He called home by phone and only came home on weekends. On the night of financial defeat, Gavrilin rattled up in his battered Fiat and shouted, "Let's go, engineer, to the center to negotiate, or the bank will ruin us." Trukov barely had time to call home. Gavrilin rushed him to the train. He spent 5 days in Moscow. The center was won over. The loan was restored. While the station and depot were being built, the people of Stargorod just made jokes. The local songster, Fedya the Plaid, even mocked the project in his songs at the Phoenix restaurant. They came to ask for my hand. Wanted a dowry. And my dad promised. A dappled tram. But when the rails were laid and wires strung on the round tram poles, even the incorrigible pessimist Fedya changed his tune. My electric steed is better than a mare. I'll ride the tram. And my sweetheart with me. The Stargorod Pravda, the well-known satirist Prince Danish, now writing as Flywheel IV, took up the tram issue. At least 3 times a week, Flywheel would publish a big feature on the construction's progress. The 3rd page of the paper, usually full of skeptical headlines like, does smell enough like a club, weak spots, inspections are needed, but what's with the glitter and long tails, good in. Add what we're happy about and what we're not. Time to crack down on the saboteurs of enlightenment, and time to end the paper C, now offered readers sunny, upbeat headlines from Flywheel. How we build, how we live, the giant will soon be working, the modest builder, and so on. Trukov would nervously open the paper, and feeling a mix of pride and annoyance at the writers, read the cheerful lines about himself. I climb the rafters, the wind howls in my ears. Up above, there he is, the unremarkable builder of our mighty tram station, this skinny, snub-nosed man in a shabby cap with little hammers. I remember, on the shore of the deserted waves, he stood, full of great thoughts. I approach, not a breath of wind, the rafters don't move. I ask, how's the work going? The builder's plain face, engineer Trukov, lights up. He shakes my hand, he says. 70% of the work is done already. The article ended. He shakes my hand goodbye, the rafters hum behind me. Workers bustle here and there. Who could forget the energy of this construction, the unassuming figure of our builder? Flywheel. Trukov was saved only by the fact that he had no time to read, and sometimes managed to skip Flywheel's latest piece. Once Trukov couldn't take it anymore and wrote a carefully worded, sarcastic rebuttal. Of course, he wrote, "You can call bolts a transmission, but only people who know nothing about construction do that. And I'd like to point out to Comrade Flywheel that rafters only hum when the building is about to collapse. Saying that about rafters is like claiming a cello gives birth to children, yours, etc." After that, the tireless prince stopped showing up at the site, but his features still brightened the third page, standing out among the usual. 15,000 rubles rusting, housing lumps, the material is crying, and curiosities and tears. Construction was nearing completion. The rails were welded together with thermite, stretching gapless from the station to the slaughterhouses, from the market to the cemetery. At first, they wanted to open the tram for the 9th anniversary of October, but the car factory, blaming the fittings, didn't deliver the cars on time. The opening was postponed to May 1st. By then, everything was ready. Shareholders strolled with the demonstrators to the Gusish. The whole city gathered there. The new depot building was draped with pine garlands, flags flapped, and the wind played with the banners. A mounted policeman galloped after the first ice cream vendor, who'd somehow gotten into the empty, cordoned-off circle. Between the two depot gates stood a thin, still-empty stand with a microphone. Delegates approached. The combined orchestra of city workers and rope makers tested their lungs. The drum lay on the ground. In the bright depot hall, where 10 light green cars stood numbered 701 to 710, a Moscow reporter in a shaggy cap wandered around. A camera hung from his neck, and he kept peering into it anxiously. He was looking for the chief engineer to ask a few tram-related questions. Even though the article about the opening, complete with a summary of speeches not yet given, was already written in his head, the reporter dutifully kept searching, finding only the lack of a buffet disappointing. Finally, he found the chief engineer. Trukov, who'd spent the night at work and hadn't eaten all morning, stood by car 703, his snub-nosed face tilted up, watching the pantograph test. He thought the spring was too weak. On the roof, the senior mechanic chatted with Trukov. "That one?" the reporter asked, nodding at Trukov. And told it was, the reporter immediately asked Trukov to stand by the car and snapped photos from every angle. The last shot probably didn't turn out, because Trukov suddenly ducked under the car and started shouting for explanations from someone. The reporter pounced on a technician, who got flustered and gave such a detailed technical explanation that the reporter, desperate to end the jargon-filled conversation, snapped his picture and ran to the stand. In the crowd, people sang, shouted, and cracked sunflower seeds, waiting for the tram to start. The presidium of the Provincial Executive Committee climbed onto the stand. Prince Danish Flywheel and the Moscow guests scribbled in their notebooks. The ceremonial meeting opened with a report from Comrade Gavrilin, chairman of Starkomhaz. The crowd listened intently. Two reporters couldn't have been more different. The Moscow guest was young and single. Prince Flywheel, with a big family, was well past 40. One had always lived in Moscow, the other had never been there. The Muscovite liked beer, Flywheel nothing but vodka, but none of that mattered. Their impressions came out in the same tired, dusty, well-worn phrases. Their pencils scratched and a new note appeared. On the holiday, Stargorod Street seemed wider. Gavrilin started his speech well and simply. "Building a tram," he said, "isn't like buying a donkey." Suddenly, Ostap Bender's loud laugh rang out from the crowd. He appreciated the line. Everyone burst out laughing. Encouraged, Gavrilin, not knowing why, suddenly started talking about international affairs. He tried several times to steer his speech back to the tram, but to his horror, the words kept coming out international. After Chamberlain, who got half an hour, American Senator Bora took the stage. The crowd wilted. Reporters quickly wrote. In vivid language, the speaker outlined the international situation of our union. Fired up, Gavrilin said some unkind things about Romanian boyars and moved on to Mussolini. Only at the end did he manage to switch back to business. "So comrades, I think this tram, which is about to roll out, is thanks to whom? Of course, comrades, thanks to all of you, to all the workers who worked not out of fear, but comrades out of conscience. And also, comrades, thanks to our honest Soviet specialist, Chief Engineer Trukov. He deserves thanks too." He started looking for Trukov, but couldn't find him. The oil center rep, who'd been itching to speak, squeezed to the rail and launched into another speech about international affairs. When he finished, both reporters, listening to the weak applause, quickly wrote, loud applause turning into an ovation. Then they thought turning into an ovation might be too much. The Muscovite crossed out ovation. Flywheel sighed and left it in. The sun slid quickly down the sky. Greetings were made from the stand. The orchestra played fanfares every few minutes. Evening turned blue and bright, but the meeting dragged on. Everyone felt something was off, that it was time to get to the tram launch, but no one could stop talking. Finally, they found Trukov. He was filthy, and before going to the stand, he spent a long time washing his face and hands in the office. "The floor is yours, Chief Engineer Comrade Trukov," Gavrilin announced happily. "Go on, or I'll keep saying the wrong thing," he whispered. Trukov wanted to say a lot about the volunteer workdays, the hard labor, everything that had been done and could still be done. There was so much to do. Free the city from the infectious market, build glass-covered halls, build a permanent bridge instead of the one washed away every year, even build a giant meatpacking plant. Trukov opened his mouth and stumbling began, "Comrades, the international situation of our country," and then he mumbled such clichés that the crowd, now on its sixth international speech, went cold. Only when he finished did Trukov realize he hadn't said a word about the tram. How annoying, he thought, we really can't speak, not at all. He remembered a speech by a French communist he'd heard in Moscow. The Frenchman talked about the bourgeois press. "These acrobats of the pen," he cried, "these virtuosos of farce, these jackals of the rotary presses." The first part of his speech was in the key of A, the second in C, the last passionate part in E. His gestures were measured and graceful. All we do is muddle things up, Trukov decided. It'd be better if we didn't speak at all. It was already dark when the chairman of the Provincial Executive Committee cut the red ribbon blocking the depot exit. Workers and community reps noisily took their seats in the cars. The little bells rang, and the first tram, driven by Trukov himself, rolled out of the depot to the deafening cheers of the crowd and the orchestra's groans. The lit-up cars looked even brighter than in the daytime. All 10 cars glided in a line through the Gusish, passed under the railroad bridge, climbed into the city, and turned onto Bolshaya Pushkinskaya. In the second car, the orchestra played the Budyani March, trumpets sticking out the windows. Gavrilin, in a conductor's uniform with a bag over his shoulder, hopped from car to car, smiling, ringing the bell at the wrong times, and handing out invitations to the gala evening May 1st, 9 p.m. at the Communal Workers' Club. 1 report by Comrade Mawson, 2 certificate presentation by the union, 3 unofficial part, big concert and family dinner with buffet. On the back platform of the last car stood Viktor Mikhailovich, somehow among the honored guests. He sniffed at the motor. To his surprise, it looked great and seemed to work perfectly. The windows didn't rattle. After a close inspection, Viktor Mikhailovich confirmed they were indeed on rubber. He'd already made several comments to the driver and was now considered a tram expert by the crowd. "The air brake isn't great," Polsov declared, looking triumphantly at the passengers. "It doesn't suck." "No one asked you," the driver replied. "It'll suck just fine without you." After a festive tour of the city, the cars returned to the depot, where a crowd was waiting. Trukov was tossed in the air under the full glare of electric lights. Gavrilin was tossed too, but since he weighed about 6 poods, he didn't fly high and was soon let down. They tossed Comrade Mawson, the technicians, and the workers. Viktor Mikhailovich was tossed for the second time that day. This time he didn't kick his legs but soared into the night, gazing seriously at the starry sky. On his last descent, Polsov noticed that the person holding his leg and laughing nastily was none other than the former nobleman Ippolit Matveyevich Vorobyaninov. Polsov politely freed himself, stepped aside, but kept an eye on the nobleman. When he saw Ippolit Matveyevich and his ever-present young companion, clearly a former officer, leaving, Viktor Mikhailovich quietly followed. When everything was over and Gavrilin, in his lilac Fiat, was waiting for Trukov to finish giving orders so they could go to the club, a Ford pickup with newsreel cameramen rolled up to the depot gates. First out was a man in 12-sided horn-rimmed glasses and a stylish sleeveless leather jacket. His long, sharp beard grew straight from his Adam's apple. The second man lugged a movie camera, tangled in a long scarf of the kind Ostap Bender called chic modern. Then came the assistants, the lights, and the girls. The whole crew rushed into the depot, shouting. "Attention," yelled the bearded director. "Kolya, set up the lights." Trukov blushed and moved toward the night visitors. "You're the movie crew," he asked. "Why didn't you come during the day?" When was the tram opening scheduled?" "It's already open." "Yeah, we're a bit late, got some great footage elsewhere. Sunset, but we'll manage." Kolya, lights, spinning wheel close-up, moving feet close-up. Lyuda, Mylachka walk through, Kolya rolling, go, 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 enough, thanks, now let's film the builder. Comrade Trukov, please, Comrade Trukov. No, not like that, 3/4 view. That's it, more original with the tram in the background. Kolya rolling, say something. "Well, I really don't know what to say." "Perfect, good, say more, now talk to the tram's first passenger." Lyuda, step into the frame, good. Take a deep breath, you're excited. Kolya, feet close-up, rolling, good, good, thank you, cut. Gavrilin, stiff from his old Fiat, came to fetch his friend. The director perked up. "Kolya, over here, great type. Worker, tram passenger, take a deep breath, you're excited. You've never ridden a tram before, rolling, breeze." Gavrilin snorted with annoyance. "Perfect, Mylachka, come here, greetings from the Komsomol. Take a deep breath, you're excited. Good, Kolya, that's a wrap." "Aren't you going to film the tram?" Trukov asked shyly. "Well," the director mumbled, "the lighting isn't right. We'll have to finish in Moscow. Bye." The crew vanished in a flash. "Let's go, buddy, time to relax," Gavrilin said. "Did you start smoking again?" "I did," Trukov admitted. "Couldn't help it." The family party, hungry and full of smoke. Trukov had 3 shots of vodka and got completely drunk. He kissed everyone and everyone kissed him. He wanted to say something nice to his wife, but just laughed. Then he shook Gavrilin's hand for a long time and said, "You're a character. You need to learn how to design railroad bridges. It's a wonderful science, and so simple. The Hudson River Bridge." Half an hour later, he was totally out of it and launched into a tirade against the bourgeois press. These acrobats of farce, these hyenas of the pen, these virtuosos of the rotary press, he shouted. His wife took him home in a cab. I want to ride the tram, he told her. Don't you get it? If there's a tram, you have to ride it. Why, first of all, it's economical. Polsov followed the shareholders, biding his time, and when no one was around, approached Vorobyaninov. Good evening, Mr. Ippolit Matveyevich, he said respectfully. Vorobyaninov felt uneasy. I don't believe we've met, he mumbled. Ostap stepped forward, shoulder first, and addressed the intelligent-looking mechanic. Well, well, he said, what do you want with my friend? No need to worry, Polsov whispered, glancing around. I'm from Elena Stanislavovna. What, she's still here? She is, and she really wants to see you. Why, asked Ostap, and who are you? I swell, Ippolit Matveyevich, don't worry about anything. You don't know me, but I remember you very well. I'd like to visit Elena Stanislavovna, Vorobyaninov said hesitantly. She especially asked you to come. Yes, but how did she know? I saw you in the Kamhaz hallway and thought, that face looks familiar. Then I remembered, don't worry, Ippolit Matveyevich, everything will be completely secret. A lady you know, Ostap asked, businesslike. Yeah, an old acquaintance. Well, maybe we should go have dinner at the old acquaintance's place. I, for one, am starving and everything's closed. Why not? Then let's go, lead the way, mysterious stranger. Viktor Mikhailovich, glancing over his shoulder, led his companions through backyards to the fortune-teller's house on Perelishinsky Lane.